vous être rejoint en nous
and thank
cet
you for being
après-midi.
here with us this afternoon.
Aujourd'hui, je suis
Today,
heureuse
I am
d'annoncer le
pleased to
début des
announce the
consultations
launch of
qui
consultations
contribueront à
that will
informer
help
et à
inform and guide
au plan de croissance et à déterminer les mesures et les investissements qui constitueront le budget 2021. Ceux-ci aideront le Canada à rebâtir en mieux. Today, I am so pleased to announce the launch of consultations that will help inform and guide our growth plan and feed into the measures and investments that will make up Budget 2021 and that will help Canada build back better. Right now, many of us are facing tighter public health restrictions and even lockdowns. Canadians continue to stay home and to do the right thing in the face of this aggressive second wave of the pandemic. And thank you, everyone, for doing that. I know that it's hard, and it is so important that we act carefully to take care of ourselves and to take care of each other. We knew this would be a hard winter, and it's proving to be every bit as difficult as we expected. Indeed, in many cases, even tougher. But there are good things happening too. Safe, effective vaccines are being administered across Canada, beginning with our most vulnerable seniors and healthcare workers on the front lines. We all wish this were happening more quickly. We all want to know that our elders and vulnerable loved ones are safe. I know that we all want our lives back. I want to assure you that our government is doing everything in our power to speed the rollout of vaccines, and that we will continue to be there to support Canadians during this unprecedented and challenging time. We will do whatever it takes for as long as it takes. By the end of September, every Canadian who wants to be vaccinated will be. And when the pandemic is behind us, we will rebuild. Dans l'énoncé économique de l'automne 2020 que nous avons publié en novembre dernier, nous avons présenté un plan détaillé pour protéger les Canadiens, les emplois et les entreprises au Canada. Et nous agissons rapidement pour donner suite à ces engagements. En soutenant les entreprises canadiennes, les emplois canadiens et les familles canadiennes, nous n'aidons pas seulement nos communautés à traverser un hiver difficile, mais nous prévenons des cicatrices économiques. Ce soutien nous permettra d'être mieux préparés pour la reprise économique au printemps. Vaincre la COVID-19 demeure notre priorité absolue. Ce virus agressif est toujours présent et il continue de causer des dommages importants. Lorsque le coronavirus sera maîtrisé, nous pourrons rebâtir notre économie. Nous mettrons en œuvre des mesures de relance ciblées dès que notre économie nationale sera en mesure de les absorber. Ces mesures permettront de stimuler une nouvelle croissance. Le choix du moment sera très important. C'est pourquoi nous travaillons déjà à déterminer les investissements que nous devrons effectuer. Our growth plan will create good jobs for middle-class Canadians by investing between $70 and $100 billion, or roughly 3 to 4% of GDP, over 3 years. Today, more than 6,000 Canadians who had a job before COVID-19 hit are still out of work. Each one of those job losses is a tragedy for a Canadian and for a Canadian family. Our government is committed to investing in economic growth and to help create the 1 million jobs as we pledged to do in the speech from the throne. This pandemic has been a setback for our economy. That's why, with our growth plan, we are committed to doing the hard work we need to do so that Canada can and will come roaring back from the COVID-19 recession. Our plan will be time limited and carefully targeted. Fiscal guardrails will help us determine when the job of building back from the COVID-19 recession is done and when the stimulus can be wound down. But let me be clear, we are not simply aiming to get back to where we were before COVID-19. The pandemic has exposed critical gaps in our social safety net, and the virus has hit certain sectors, certain groups of people harder than others. Seniors, women, low-wage workers, young people, people of color, Indigenous people. Small businesses, which are not only the foundation for our economy, but the heart of our communities, have also been particularly affected. And we need to build an economy that is greener and more sustainable than ever. We also know that Canada's economy in the post-COVID era needs to be more innovative and more competitive than ever. For all of these reasons, the 2021 budget will be among the most significant of our lifetime. And that's why we want to hear from Canadians about your priorities. Nous voulons connaître vos idées sur ce que nous pouvons faire mieux pour soutenir les familles et les entreprises, relancer notre économie et maintenir notre solide situation financière. J'encourage donc tous les Canadiens à visiter le site web parlonsbudget2021.ca pour exprimer leur point de vue sur la meilleure façon de faire croître l'économie canadienne. Dans les semaines à venir, notre gouvernement organisera des tables rondes virtuelles avec les intervenants et des experts de divers secteurs et industries, afin de discuter des moyens de renforcer la relance économique de notre pays. So I really encourage all Canadians to visit letstalkbudget2021.ca. Please share your views about how we can best grow Canada's economy and create those 1 million jobs. What's most important to you? What challenges lie ahead? How do we build an economy that is greener, more innovative, and more inclusive? After a year when many of us have lived virtually, how do we help our small businesses thrive in the digital economy? How do we ensure that Canadians have the skills we need to do digital jobs and that everyone across our vast country has access to broadband? In the weeks ahead, our government will hold virtual roundtables with stakeholders and experts from a range of sectors and industries to discuss ways to drive our country's economic recovery. Together with Associate Finance Minister Mona Fortier and Parliamentary Secretary Sean Fraser, we are asking Canadians to share your ideas on a range of important issues, from addressing the SHE session, which includes early learning and childcare, to supporting our small businesses' recovery and building a green economy that will create jobs and opportunities. We look forward to hearing your thoughts on how the federal government can continue to prepare our country for a robust recovery. Your ideas on what we can do, all of us together, to ensure that Canada comes roaring back from COVID. Together, I know that we will build a stronger, more resilient middle class and grow the Canadian economy that improves the lives of every single person in our country. Let me just conclude by saying that I know we're living in a tough time. It is a cold and hard winter, but we all know that it is darkest before the dawn. As a country, we have faced adversity before. We are no strangers to cold, hard winters. And every time Canada has faced challenges, we have emerged stronger. I know we will this time too, by facing this challenge together. Mona, je te donne la parole.
Bonjour tout le monde. Hello everyone. Et merci beaucoup à la vice-première ministre Freeland pour cet accueil chaleureux et à vous tous d'être ici aujourd'hui. Before I begin, I would like to recognize that I am joining you from Ottawa, which is on Algonquin and Anishinaabe traditional territory. As we continue to fight COVID-19, our government's top priority continues to be supporting Canadians and our businesses. Our resolve is unwavering. Dans les communautés de l'Est de l'Ontario seulement, nous avons protégé au-delà de 2770 emplois avec le Fonds d'aide et de relance régionale. Plus de 380 entreprises ont eu accès à ce programme, ce qui a permis aux travailleurs et à leurs familles de continuer de mettre de la nourriture sur la table et un toit au-dessus de leur tête. Mais cela ne représente qu'une seule région. Nous avons travaillé avec acharnement dans l'ensemble de notre magnifique pays pour protéger les emplois et soutenir les familles, pour que nous puissions revenir en force après cette pandémie. As we hunker down and follow public health advice, our resolve must not weaken. We must also not lose sight of better days to come. With the vaccine rollout currently underway in collaboration with provinces and territories, we are one step closer to a day where we can safely reopen our economy and rebuild so that we are better and stronger than we have ever been before. Et c'est pour cette raison que nous voulons vous entendre. Dans le cadre de ces consultations prébudgétaires, nous voulons entendre tous les Canadiennes et les Canadiens, dans tous les coins, sur toutes les côtes, parler de leurs priorités, de leurs idées pour l'avenir et des questions qui leur tiennent le plus à cœur. For me, when I speak to my constituents in Ottawa-Vanier, I hear about how community members want to emerge from this pandemic. In particular, I hear how they support our plan for a clean future so their children continue to have access to fresh air, clean water, and quality of life measures. We will want to hear from you as Canadians about how best to move forward. After all, this is your growth plan and your budget. Quelle est votre vision d'une économie post-pandémique? Quelle est, selon vous, la meilleure manière de faire face aux impacts de la pandémie sur notre communauté ou votre industrie? Quelle voie envisagez-vous forger un avenir meilleur et plus fort pour notre pays? En travaillant ensemble et en partageant des idées, le budget 2021 visera à construire une économie plus inclusive, plus équitable, plus durable et meilleure pour tous. An economy in which all Canadians are able to participate, contribute to, and benefit from, regardless of their race, religion, gender, sexual orientation, age, or abilities. An economy that leaves no one behind, that strengthens and grows the middle class. I encourage all Canadians to visit letstalkbudget2021.ca to share their vision, their ideas, as we chart this shared path forward together. Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, ministers. We'll now turn to the phone for 3 questions. On va maintenant aller au téléphone pour des questions.
Thank you, merci. You may press star 1 if you have a question. Vous pouvez appuyer sur étoile 1 si vous avez une question. La première question de Raymond Fillon, TVA. La parole est à vous.
Merci beaucoup. Bonjour. Une question pour Mme Freeland. Au sujet des voyageurs qui vont en vacances dans le Sud, notamment par les temps qui courent, j'aimerais savoir quelle est la solution qui est privilégiée par votre gouvernement pour assurer que ces personnes ne ramènent pas le coronavirus au Canada. Est-ce la quarantaine obligatoire dans un hôtel à leurs frais ou l'interdiction des vols vers certaines destinations? Qu'est-ce que vous privilégiez comme solution?
Merci pour la question, Raymond. Et c'est vraiment un enjeu très important, un enjeu que notre gouvernement est en train de considérer maintenant. Je veux commencer en disant à tous les Canadiens, ce n'est pas le moment de voyager. C'est le moment de rester à la maison. C'est très important. C'est important pour votre santé, c'est important pour la santé de votre famille et c'est important pour la santé de votre communauté. Alors, je veux vraiment souligner, nous ne devons pas voyager maintenant. C'est pourquoi je suis aujourd'hui à Toronto, par exemple, où j'habite, où est ma maison. Concernant la frontière, je veux aussi souligner que le Canada a déjà les mesures très fortes en place avec la quarantaine obligatoire et c'est la loi que si on voyage, on doit suivre la quarantaine. Et je veux aussi souligner que la quarantaine, c'est une chose très sérieuse. Et on a aussi des tests de dépistage obligatoires avant de revenir au Canada. Mais vraiment, vous avez raison qu'on considère toujours la sécurité de notre frontière. Et en vue de la situation du COVID aujourd'hui, notre gouvernement est en train de discuter avec tous les membres du gouvernement et aussi en étroite collaboration avec les provinces et territoires des mesures additionnelles.
Alors, à quel moment doit-on s'attendre à une annonce? Est-ce que ce sera fait dès demain par le premier ministre? Allez-vous décider aujourd'hui? Et est-ce que vous êtes personnellement favorable au recours à la loi sur les mesures d'urgence ou vous préférez éviter ça?
Comme le premier ministre a déjà dit, une annonce est possible à aucun moment. Et c'est important pour les Canadiens de comprendre ça. C'est encore une raison pour laquelle on ne doit pas faire les voyages maintenant. Concernant les discussions internes de notre gouvernement, je ne vais pas partager les conversations qu'on a au sein du gouvernement. Mais je veux vraiment souligner encore une fois qu'on prend cet enjeu très, très au sérieux et on est en train de considérer l'enjeu au niveau très, très sérieux.
Deputy Prime Minister, could you repeat the question and your answer in English?
Sure. So let me start by saying that when it comes to travel outside our country, I cannot urge Canadians too strongly. Please, now is not the time to travel. Traveling is dangerous for you, it's dangerous for your family, and it's dangerous for your community. Now is the time for all of us to stay home. When it comes to our border measures, Canada already has in place considerable tough border measures. We have an obligatory quarantine order for anyone who enters Canada from abroad. And let me emphasize, obligatory quarantine is very seriously, the government takes it seriously, and anyone entering Canada needs to take that quarantine order very seriously as well. We also now have obligatory testing for people entering the country from abroad before they get on that plane. So those are important measures and they are in place today. Having said that, Given the virulence of the virus in the world today, our government absolutely is looking seriously and carefully at measures to further guarantee the toughness of our border measures. We're looking at that very actively right now.
Thank you. Prochaine question.
Thank you, merci. The next question is from David Youngren from Reuters. Please go ahead.
Yes, good afternoon, Deputy Prime Minister, and Happy New Year. The text of the executive order that President Biden is signing on Buy America has just been released. How concerned are you about the potential implications for Canada of this order?
Thanks for the question, David, and Happy New Year to you, and Happy New Year to all the journalists who are here. The Prime Minister and President Biden, in their first conversation, have already discussed Buy America. And I think it is worth pointing out that the president's first conversation was with Prime Minister Trudeau. That is an important sign of the importance that this administration places on its relationship with its northern neighbor. Buy America protectionist provisions are not new for our government. They are something that we are used to dealing with. One thing that I would say is on these measures, the devil is very often in the detail. And what our experience has often shown is once we get into the details, once we show to our American neighbors and trading partners the extent to which every trading relationship with Canada is not a simple one-way trade, but is about a set of mutually dependent, really, really complicated manufacturing and trading relationships, we find that we are very often able to explain to our American partners that that trade is in the mutual interest of Canadians and of Americans. That is what we discovered when we delved into the rules of origin for the car sector, for example. It's even what we discovered in the spring when we looked at N95 masks that were coming from the US to Canada, but where we discovered that the US was also dependent on Canada for many inputs into the medical equipment supply chain. Not to mention the amazing doctors and nurses and medical professionals who travel from Canada to the US every day. So I think it's really important when people look at Buy America to understand that the trading relationship between Canada and the United States is particular, it is special. The United States sells more to Canada than it does to China, Japan, and the UK combined. And what we are really going to focus on in our work with the Biden administration is those win-wins. Really focus on the ways in which North America working together is the most competitive economy in the world, and how we can recover from COVID together by emphasizing that interconnection.
Thank you. Follow-up question?
So I don't want to put words in your mouth, Minister, but it doesn't sound as though you're necessarily overly concerned at this stage. Is that a correct interpretation of your remarks?
Thank you for that caution and that care, David. I really appreciate it. I am concerned. We are always concerned about Buy America. And let me be clear about that. Canada is a trading nation. We think that trade is good for Canada, and we think trade is good for our partners. And we are very aware of the value of free trade between Canada and the United States, of its value for Canada, and of its value for the United States. That's why the Prime Minister raised Buy America in his conversation with President Biden. And for sure, that is going to be an issue very, very high on our agenda in our work with the Biden administration.
Prochaine question. Next question.
Thank you. Merci. La prochaine question. The next question is from Heather Schofield, the Toronto Star. Please go ahead.
Hello, Minister. Thanks for taking our questions. Do you think that, just looking to your pre-budget consultations here, and you're talking about building back better, do you think that the government should be picking and choosing which parts of the economy have the most potential, and should the budget be reflecting that with programs and heft?
First of all, hi, Heather. Nice to hear you. The priority for the government is first and foremost to continue to prosecute and to win the fight against COVID and to protect Canadian jobs and Canadian businesses while we fight COVID together. So when it comes to priorities, I want to be really, really clear that we know COVID is still here and our eyes are on that prize. When it comes to doing what we need to do so Canada can come roaring back from the COVID recession, our focus is jobs, 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 and growth. And we're going to be relentless about that because we know that what Canada needs most of all is to recover those jobs we have lost and to have a strong, robustly growing economy. How do we get there? That is what we're working on and looking at in our pre-budget consultation. And I'm not here today to reveal or to talk about what the approach in the budget is going to be, beyond saying it's going to be about jobs, it's going to be about growth, it's going to be about the middle class, it is going to be about healing the wounds of COVID. It is going to be about building a Canadian economy which is more innovative, more competitive, greener, more sustainable.
Follow-up question?
Yes, I do. I'm just wondering, as we see some other countries ahead of us on administering vaccines, is there a risk that we lose our competitive edge? Does it erode because other countries will be able to open up before we can?
Vaccines are really, really important. And I want to assure Canadians that our government is absolutely focused on getting vaccines to Canadians and on working hard with provinces and territories to ensure that vaccines are distributed across the country. Our foot is really on the gas pedal. We are not resting on our laurels on this one. This is an effort that the Prime Minister is personally very involved in, that Minister Anita Anand is very involved in, and she has the support of all of her cabinet colleagues. I'm involved. This is a full court press. We absolutely are aware of how important vaccines and vaccination are to Canadians. And they're important, let's remember, they're important first and foremost because they are saving lives and protecting our loved ones. But I'm finance minister, and I am very aware of how important vaccines are for our economy. That's why it has been so important for Canada to procure our diverse portfolio of vaccines. And it's so important for us to be able to assure Canadians that everyone who wants to be vaccinated will be vaccinated by September. And I just, this is a long and difficult journey to get vaccinated. We're very, very focused on it, and we are not going to rest as a government until this job is complete.
On va maintenant prendre des questions dans la salle. We'll now turn to the room.
Hi, Ms. Freeland. Mackenzie Gray with CTV News. You mentioned in your remarks that Canada has some of the toughest border measures, but that seemingly has not stopped many Canadians, including a number of politicians, from taking winter trips to nice, sunny vacations. Do you regret the government's position of asking Canadians nicely to stay home over the winter break instead of enforcing tougher measures off the start? And you mentioned also that the government is looking at bringing in tougher travel measures. Can you be more specific on what the government's looking to bring in?
You know what, Mackenzie, as a rule, I never regret asking for things nicely. I think that that's a pretty good approach in life. But I believe that you need to be polite and have a smile on your face and also have tough rules and measures in place. And that's why the 14-day obligatory quarantine is a really important, really, really tough measure. And I am glad that it is there. And I am glad it has been in place for months. And I want to remind Canadians that this is a legal obligation of everyone entering the country. The same is true for the requirement to have a negative test before getting on a plane and coming into Canada. And people who do not have that test done will not be allowed to come back. So these are tough measures, and I am glad they are in place. Of course, the best measure of all is for people simply not to travel. And I can't emphasize too much how important that is for all of us just to stay home. As for additional border measures, those are actively being considered. And, actively being considered within the government. We are working in collaboration with provinces and territories, as we have since the beginning of this pandemic. And it's absolutely the right thing for us to be actively considering tougher measures, given the virulence that we're seeing of COVID around the world.
In your remarks, you repeated a phrase that many members of the government have said, that Canadians are going to be able to be vaccinated by the end of September. That would, if a 2-dose regimen takes a month, leave us around the end of October, the end of November, potentially for all Canadians to be vaccinated fully by that point in time, if the promise that your government holds. Is it fair for businesses and for Canadians who are looking for certainty about what they can plan going forward to expect that life will be back to somewhat normal around October and November after vaccinations are completed?
This is a sneaky, sneaky virus, and we all have to be aware of that. Having said that, I think it's also really important for us to see that there is light at the end of the tunnel. I had a meeting together with Mona, with the provincial and territorial finance ministers on Friday. And one of the ministers, I'm not going to quote her because she didn't give me leave to do so, but she said, look, this is the situation today. There's light at the end of the tunnel, but it's a long tunnel. And I think that is a good way of describing the situation that we find ourselves in now. I think it is absolutely the case that vaccines are critical. It is good news that we have started to vaccinate Canadians, and that is good news because it's going to save lives. It is also good news because it will make it possible for us to reopen our economy fully and all get back to work. I want to emphasize also the importance of the measures that provinces and territories across the country are taking to limit the spread of the coronavirus. And we see that those measures do pay off also in economic terms. Atlantic Canada, which has been so successful at limiting the spread of the virus, has been able to keep its economy open more than many other parts of the country. So that brings an economic benefit as well. And I am very confident that as the vaccination rolls out, we are going to start reaping economic benefits across the country as well.
Next question, prochaine question.
Yes, Minister Lee Berthium, Canadian Press. On the promised stimulus money, what figures do you need to see from your preferred indicator, and when do you need to see them for you to decide if the time is right to start spending the $70 to $100 billion?
So that is a good question, Lee. And with the fiscal guardrails that we announced in the fall economic statement, those are really about letting us know when the stimulus has done its job. So those were really figures around employment, around the employment level, around jobs, around hours worked. And they are a way to really quantify and have data-driven triggers to put into numbers our stated commitment of focusing on jobs, jobs, jobs. So those fiscal guardrails are going to tell us when we have done our job of getting Canadians back to work. In terms of the timing of the stimulus, that is a question that's a question that is very connected with our ability as a country to contain the coronavirus, to conquer the coronavirus. Some stimulus measures we can begin working on, we can begin putting in place sooner. Other measures, things like reopening the economy for tourism, reopening the economy for restaurants, those are measures where we need to be more confident that the virus is fully under control. So, it's going to have to be an approach that is very thoughtful about job number one, getting the coronavirus under control, and which really looks at what we can do to get jobs and to get growth for Canadians.
And I'd like to follow up with a question about vaccines. Why should Canadians trust what you're saying and what the government is saying about everyone being able to get a vaccine by September when it appears this issue is totally out of your control? Aren't you getting people's hopes up in a way that you can't guarantee?
That's a good question, Lee. And it is absolutely the case that we have purchased our vaccines from a number of vaccine companies around the world. And as we have seen, there is tremendous pressure on global supply chains for vaccines. Having said that, we have a lot of insurance policies. One of them, perhaps the most important one, is that we have a really diverse vaccine portfolio. And we built a diverse vaccine portfolio on purpose so that Canada would not be dependent on one vaccine or on one supplier. As you also know, we have bought a lot of vaccines, more than we need to vaccinate all Canadians. And again, that redundancy, that sort of approach of belts and braces is why Canadians should have confidence. When the Prime Minister says that all Canadians who want to will be vaccinated by the end of September, that commitment to Canadians is based on a diverse and extensive vaccine portfolio that has a lot of insurance policies built into it. And it is based on the fact that we really are not resting on our laurels when it comes to vaccines. We are working on this every single day because we know how important vaccines are to Canadians, to first and foremost the lives of Canadians, and also to our economy.
We'll now take questions from the phone. We'll have time for 2 more questions. On retourne au téléphone. On aura le temps pour 2 questions. Merci.
La prochaine question est de Hélène Buzetti, Le Devoir. La parole est à vous.
Oui, bonjour Madame la ministre. Je vous demanderai pas de me dire quelle est la date de votre budget, vous me le direz pas, mais j'aimerais savoir, considérant la situation, pour vous, est-ce que vous voudriez attendre un peu plus tard que le nombre de personnes vaccinées soit plus grand avant de déposer votre budget, ou vous voyez une certaine précipitation à le faire plus fin février, début mars que plutôt fin avril? C'est quoi votre préférence dans le contexte?
Hélène, en tant qu'ancienne journaliste, je dois dire que c'est une excellente question et très, très bien posée. Mais vous avez eu raison au début de la question quand vous avez dit que ce ne sera pas possible pour moi de dire quelle sera la date du budget. Et c'est vrai, je ne peux pas le dire aujourd'hui et je ne même pas peux répondre aux des questions très intelligentes pour essayer de comprendre quelle sera la date.
Et en sous-question, aujourd'hui, il y aura un... Pardon? Oui, donc en sous-question, aujourd'hui, il y aura un projet de loi qui sera déposé pour interdire d'accès aux voyageurs au congé de maladie payé. Je sais que votre gouvernement demandait le consentement unanime pour que ce soit adopté rapidement, mais les indications que nous avons des autres partis, c'est que vous n'aurez pas ce consentement. Est-ce que ça pose problème d'attendre un peu plus longtemps pour adopter ce projet de loi? Et si oui, pourquoi?
Je vais laisser à mon collègue, l'excellent Pablo Rodriguez, la stratégie dans la Chambre des communes. Mais concernant le cible de ce projet de loi, je veux souligner encore une fois pour tous les Canadiens que ce n'est pas le moment de voyager. Ce n'est pas le moment de prendre une vacance à l'extérieur de notre pays. Et on ne doit pas penser que si on fait la mauvaise chose et prendre un voyage, que la période de quarantaine sera payée. Ce ne sera pas le cas. Et je veux aussi souligner que la quarantaine obligatoire, c'est une grande chose et la quarantaine sera renforcée par le gouvernement. Mais premièrement, je vous en prie, chers citoyens du Canada, on ne doit pas voyager.
Prochaine question. Last question.
Thank you. Merci. The last question is from Bill Curry from the Globe and Mail. Please go ahead.
Thanks for Minister Freeland. Your November 30th economic statement said this fiscal year's deficit would be $381.6 billion, but that it could be nearly $400 billion if the pandemic worsened and there were more restrictions. And that did happen. The pandemic did worsen and there were more restrictions, particularly in Quebec and Ontario. So does that mean the deficit is now tracking closer to $400 billion or even higher than $400 billion?
Thanks for the very good question, Bill. I am not going to disclose any new budget or spending numbers today, but you're quite right to point out that we included a couple of additional scenarios in the fall economic statement on November 30th, an escalated restrictions and a kind of super escalated restrictions scenario. We did that because we knew at the time that the biggest economic variable was the coronavirus and that it was important for us to be humble in the face of the coronavirus and recognize that things could get worse than it appeared they were likely to, than sort of the mainstream forecast was at the end of November. So I'm glad we included those additional scenarios in the fall economic statement. And, you know, we continue to look at the impact of the restrictions across the country. We continue to look at their economic impact. Having said that, I do want to say, as I said to the finance ministers of the provinces and whom I met virtually on Friday, that the federal government really supports provinces and territories in introducing additional restrictions as provinces and territories working with their public health authorities as they deem to be necessary. The best economic policy for our country right now is to fight and to conquer the coronavirus. And that's why we've put in place measures like the lockdown support. That is why we increased the wage subsidy to 75% in the fall, because we wanted to give provinces and territories, public health officers in provinces and territories, the economic support they needed, the tools they needed to take necessary and difficult measures.
As a last follow-up.
Thanks. And then on the issue of new tax revenue, the NDP is urging you to raise new tax revenue from high-wealth Canadians and large corporations. And then on the other side, Pfizer Canada put in a pre-budget submission in which they're calling for corporate tax cuts and other business tax breaks. So can you provide a sense of where you stand in response to these two conflicting pre-budget recommendations on the issue of new tax revenue?
I imagine, thanks for the question, Bill. I fully expect that in the course of these really extensive pre-budget consultations, we are going to have a lot of very diverse and inevitably sometimes contradictory recommendations. Consulting broadly means you hear from a wide range of people who have different points of view. Mona and I and our teams are really looking forward to hearing those views, to understanding people's perspectives. Today is not the day when we're going to do the big reveal of where the budget is going to go. That would be entirely premature at the beginning of a pre-budget consultation process. But I will say, as I said at the beginning, that our focus, first and foremost, is fighting the coronavirus. We really are not taking our eyes off the prize. We know that is the single most important economic policy. And then our focus is on jobs, growth for the Canadian middle class. We know that that is what a Canadian economy battered by the coronavirus needs. And that is, the core objective that we are going to work really hard to achieve. And I'm looking forward to getting lots of ideas from Canadians from coast to coast to coast on how best we can do that.
Thank you, everyone. This concludes today's press conference. Ceci met fin à la conférence de presse. Merci à tous.